Hi, I'm Mike Carpenter, frequently and sometimes affectionately known as Mike the Money Man. I'm a licensed mortgage broker in the state of Washington, and my license number is 111356. Other than down payment options and rate, what I'm most often asked about in my meetings with my clients is what is closing costs. So I've created this video to explain what closing costs are and sort of demystify some of the myths associated with what closing costs are. So let's jump in and get to it. So other than the down payment, the 3% or 5% or 3.5% or 10% that we talked about in the previous videos, there are two other costs associated with doing a loan. The first is closing cost. And the other is prepaid items. And prepaid items are items like prepaid hazard insurance or homeowners insurance, and prepaid property taxes, and prepaid interest. And we're not going to really cover prepaid items in this section. We're going to wait till the next section. And the section after that, we'll be talking about prepaid interest because it's kind of so specialized and somewhat interesting that it deserves its own section. But closing cost can be thought of as true costs. All the myriad of people who provide services for the loan or are required to provide services for the loan, and prepaid items are items that you pay for in advance. And oftentimes when people say my closing costs were, say, $6,000, my closing costs were $8,000, they're usually referring to both closing costs and prepaid items. But classically, closing costs are cost, and prepaid items are items that you pay for in advance on your own behalf. And some closing costs are fixed, and some of them vary depending upon what you're doing. But here goes. First and foremost is something called underwriting. And that is not something that our company gets or I get. That is what the final lender charges to underwrite and process your loan. And typically that will run between, say, $6.95 and $9.95, depending upon the lender. But they're fixed, and it doesn't vary depending upon the purchase price of the house or the loan amount. So that's considered a fixed cost. Second is a cost for an appraisal. I'm not sure you can read my writing there, but appraisal. And that is typically something in the order of about $4.95 to, say, $6.95, depending upon what you're planning on buying. If you're buying an investment property or you're buying a terribly expensive house, it can be higher than that. Or you're buying, say, a 2-unit or a 3-unit or 4-unit property, it can be a little bit more expensive, but typically it runs, say, $4.95 to, say, $6.95. There is the cost for a credit report, and they vary from mortgage broker to mortgage broker, but mine happens to be $37.40, and that is a fixed cost. Typically when I get somebody approved, I provide a credit report as a courtesy, and then if they wind up doing a loan, I recoup that cost. So there's two variable costs. One is called escrow or settlement, and that is varies based upon the purchase price, and it may be somewhere between, say, $850 to, say, $1,000, depending upon the purchase price of the house, and plus 10.4% tax. So it's always an odd number. It's like $895.12. So it's never an even number, but it does vary based upon the purchase price. And there's something called title insurance. And that is somewhat comparable to escrow. And that does vary based upon the loan amount. So the smaller the loan amount, or the more you put down, the less expensive the title insurance is. And then there is something called a recording fee. And that really varies. It's kind of a variable cost. And it can range, say, $175 to $250. And that depends upon the county that you're buying in, and the amount of paperwork that has to be recorded down at the county courthouse. And there are some miscellaneous costs that may or may not apply. I just call them miscellaneous. These may be, say, courier, although I'm not sure who uses really a courier anymore. Wire fee, or FedEx, something like that. And these are items that the escrow company would use in conjunction with providing their services. And these may be $25 each, or $35 each, but usually these don't apply unless they're services that the escrow company has to use in order to close your loan. We've done a section on condos versus single-family residences, but there may be some additional costs associated with buying a condominium. And I'll condo. And a lot of these will depend upon how the management company is set up and how the homeowners association is set up. But there may be something called a Condo Questionnaire Fee. Most lenders, when lending on a condo, require that there be some sort of condo questionnaire filled out, which talks about the nature of how the condominium is set up. But the management company or the homeowners association will charge anywhere from, say, $75 to, say, $250, depending upon what their rules are. And there may be something called a move in, move out fee. I know it sounds a little odd, but that could be somewhere between, say, $75 and $150. One would argue that that's just a way for the management company or the homeowners association to get a little extra money out of the transaction, and you may or may not be wrong on that. Or it may be referred to as a Tran Transfer Fee. They could call it anything they want. They're just charging you a little bit of money to transfer all of the paperwork over into your name from the previous owner. And there may be something called an Escrow Questionnaire Fee, in case the escrow company. So this condo questionnaire is something that I send to the management company, and this condominium questionnaire, the escrow condominium questionnaire, is something that the escrow company requires from the management company, and they may also charge a fee to fill that out. And it's going to be similar to this, say $75 to $250. So people are often ask me, is it more expensive to buy a condo? Yes, but the extra expenses aren't particularly material. They're not a huge amount, but they typically are a little bit higher. So when somebody says, how much are my total closing costs? Often they refer to closing costs and prepaid items synonymously. So if we add all this up, it may be, say, $3,600 to, say, $4,000 just in closing costs, depending upon all of these different things that we've spoken about. But when people say, what are my total closing costs, they're often referring to what is this plus whatever the prepaid items are. And there's always an equal and, say, opposite side from closing costs to prepaid items. So if I were to estimate, I would say it's 36 to 4 plus another, say, 3,200 to say $3,800 for a total amount if you add both of these together. We're going to go into prepaid items and what all these are, but these prepaid hazard insurance, prepaid property taxes, and prepaid interest really have to do with the property that you're buying and when you're buying the property. So it's really hard to estimate what those items are. But I wanted to also go on a quick aside and talk about escrow and settlement. So typically when you buy a house with a door and a tree, there is a buyer's agent, call him buyer's agent, that represents you. And then there's a listing agent, which represents, this is what an agent looks like. They're very skinny. There's a listing agent that represents the buyer. And it is traditional for the listing agent to choose who the escrow company are and who the title company are. And you've heard of, say, Chicago Title and Escrow, or Old Republic Title and Escrow, and you may have heard of, say, Ticor. They're pretty common escrow and title companies. But it is traditional for the listing agent to choose who the escrow and title company are. And if you have a transaction and you want to estimate what these fees are, almost all of these companies provide an online fee calculator. So you would just go to your browser and use Google and type in or search for Chicago escrow and title fee calculation or fee estimate calculation, and it'll pull up their website, and you can type in what your estimated purchase price are and loan amount, and you can get a pretty accurate estimate of what the company's escrow and title fees would be. I've had a number of people respond to the closing cost video requesting more information on what the role of escrow and title are. So I figured I'd append this video with some more information. So in the previous portion of this video, we had mentioned that there's two variable costs associated with doing a loan. One is escrow or settlement, and title insurance. And we mentioned that in the previous video, we mentioned that, say, escrow might be, say, $950 plus tax. And we mentioned that title insurance might be, say, $850 plus tax. And we mentioned that the escrow company, the cost of escrow is dependent upon what the actual purchase price is. And we also mentioned that title insurance is dependent upon the loan amount. So the larger the purchase price, the more expensive this becomes, and the larger the loan amount, the more expensive that becomes. And not only does it vary based upon the purchase price and the loan amount, it varies from company to company. So you may have heard of, say, Chicago. That's a pretty common name, Chicago Title and Escrow, or, say, Ticor Title and Insurance, or Old Republic Title and Insurance, Escrow and Title. These parties don't have to be affiliated with each other. They could be completely two separate parties, but usually it's Chicago Title and Escrow, or Ticor Title and Escrow, or something of that nature. But the role of escrow, so an escrow company is sort of the financial center of the transaction, and their job is to bring in all the money and pay out all the money, and balance all of the money in the transaction. But they also facilitate the signing for both the buyer and the seller. But one of their things that they do is they come up with something called a settlement statement. And that settlement statement, formerly known as a HUD statement, I don't think they call it a HUD statement anymore, but what they do is there's a center column with all the costs, and then there's a seller side and a buyer side. And they figure out what the bottom line is for both the buyer and the seller. So the seller may have to come in with money, or the seller may get money back, depending upon their situation. And the buyer may also come in with money or get money back, depending upon what their situation is. But one of escrow's job is to clear title, and the lender requires title insurance, so it can understand what liens need to be paid off, and and they want to make sure that their lien is in first position when the loan closes. But let's say that you're buying this house right here, this house that has a nice window and a door and a tree. And let's say that we have a seller, and that seller, his name is Joe. Here's Joe right here. And let's say that Joe owes people money. And down at the county courthouse, there are records about who Joe owes money to. And let's say that Joe's title report has a first mortgage lender and he owes $200,000. And let's say that Joe also owes a second mortgage lender $100,000. And let's say that Joe, for reasons that we won't go into, owes the IRS some back taxes. And let's say that he owes the IRS $20,000. And just for fun, let's throw in a judgment of $5,000. Let's say, for whatever reason, Joe has a judgment. So part of escrow's job is to examine the title and understand what liens Joe owes and make sure that those are all accounted for right here on the settlement statement. Different color. So, and part of the insurance of title insurance is making sure that you do not get this property that you're buying with any of Joe's liens and encumbrances on your title. And that's effectively what the role of escrow and title are. Now, it's interesting to note that this is only one half of, on a buyer's transaction, or excuse me, a selling transaction. This is only one half. There's an equal and opposite amount for Joe. So this is only one half of what these fees would be. And there's another half that Joe would owe as well. On a refinance, there's only this amount of money. But on a buyer side, with both a buyer and seller, there's two sides to that transaction. And those fees appear on the seller side and the buyer side as well. So I hope that is clear, or at least somewhat clear. If you have any questions, please email me and I'm happy to answer them for you. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you found it useful and informative. It's intended as a broad overview of the material so that you may have some further questions. Feel free to ask them and I'll be happy to answer them as best I can. Share, like, and subscribe, but share it with somebody who can actually use it. Maybe someone who's going through the loan process and is a little confused. Hope they get something out of it as well. So happy viewing. There's more to the series. Hope you enjoy the rest of the videos. Thank you. And now for a quick disclaimer. So these videos are intended for informational purposes only. So don't rely on them for making important financial decisions, especially decisions concerning your housing. If you've got any questions about how this information applies to your given situation or your given transaction, please contact your mortgage broker directly and they can give you advice. And any rate, fee, cost, or loan limit information was accurate at the time that the video was made, but may not be currently accurate because underwriting guidelines change all the time. So if you've got any questions about how this information relates to you specifically, contact your mortgage broker. So I hope you continue to enjoy the series. Thanks.